Welcome to the Uncut Podcast. I'm Pastor Luke.
I'm Pastor Cameron.
And this is the Uncut Podcast, where we have honest, uncut conversations about faith, life, and ministry.
Back with another episode of Talking Fast and Not Too Slow.
Talking fast, not too slow. We're going to be talking about Sabbath today.
Quickly.
I feel like that's a little bit of the antithesis of it.
Yes.
Yeah, so we kind of kicked off here last week on the podcast, but then also in their sermon series about Sabbath. And maybe let's start with, we were beginning to have a conversation yesterday, Cam, where you were kind of preparing for last night's class where we talked about Sabbath. And you just had this sense that Sabbath was going to be the very difficult practice for our church to actually follow, more so than prayer.
More so than prayer. Yeah, I didn't really anticipate this as we were talking about and planning the series for the year. But as I've been reading in Sabbath material, preparing for my times to preach in the Sabbath series, then also getting a better understanding even in my own self on what Sabbath is and its purpose, it seems really clear to me that there is not as much there's not as much cultural obstacles to prayer as there is cultural obstacles to Sabbath.
Yeah.
It is something that, which is I'm wondering if this is why that the church has such a difficult time taking Sabbath seriously, is because unlike other spiritual practices, we have not really been formed culturally in the antithesis of prayer. But we have been formed culturally in the antithesis of Sabbath.
Yeah, like what's the opposite of prayer?
Not prayer.
Not prayer. But what's the opposite of Sabbath? Literally our whole culture.
Our whole culture.
Right.
Yep. Busy, hurried, frantic, overconsumption, never stopping, getting our identity from the things that we do, from our work, thinking that more is better, embracing the grind, influencer life.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is no wonder that we come into a conversation about Sabbath in the church and everyone kind of snickers about it as if it's like the thing that we talk about because we have to, but it's not the thing that we talk about because we're eager to pursue likeness of Jesus in Sabbath.
Yeah.
And for me, that I read a sentence yesterday in one of the books that we're using for our Wednesday night Bible study, and it was essentially it said, that if you want to be a follower of Jesus, if you want to apprentice in the way of Jesus, you have to do the things that Jesus did.
Yeah.
And Jesus Sabbathed. And so there's not really a way for us to conceptualize of a desire to follow Jesus, but only a desire to follow him in certain areas of his life or ministry or whatever. So we have to make the decision as to whether or not we're going to allow the culture to form us, or we are going to allow the life and practice of Jesus and the words of Scripture to form us. And that requires a huge amount of crucifixion of self to do that. That is picking up your cross. That is dying to yourself and dying to the formation of the culture within you. So yeah, I just think that it's going to be really difficult for people. And we're going to have to call them to a radical a radical version
Mm-hmm.
of discipleship to Jesus in order for this to be.
Yeah. To be practiced
Yeah.
and integrated.
Mm-hmm.
Why I'm noticing that talking about Sabbath makes people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sensing that?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Although I think I do.
Okay.
You know, I mean,
You've got like maybe a guess, but you're
yeah,
not like positive.
sure. Well, there's like this, I have this big meta narrative answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have like the more practical, I'm not sure. Because even like in our Bible study last night,
Mm-hmm.
where we probably had half as many people,
Yes, we had less people.
not even by like a few here and there, like
Right.
half as many
Mm-hmm. Came to our
Sabbath
study
than
than
came to our prayer study.
right. And it might have just been that it was nice out yesterday, but
I doubt it.
yeah.
And that could be just whatever.
Yeah, it could
But
be a fluke.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I think that we live in many ways. We live according to kingdom values
Mm-hmm.
that aren't of like in our work life rhythm, the
Mm-hmm.
rhythms of our life. We do not live according to the kingdom of heaven type of values.
Mm-hmm.
And we do really discern, like really decidedly live according to the values of this world, the kingdom of this world, which is work harder,
Mm-hmm.
do more, produce more, build it high,
Yep.
don't rest,
Be on.
don't be lazy. Yeah, lock in.
Yep.
Let's go.
Yep.
And that is glorified.
Yeah.
It's not even it's not just tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
It's glorified.
Yeah, that was one of the points that resonated with me from the video teaching from last night.
Mm-hmm.
Was I can't remember exactly how it was said, but it was something like, "Oh, most people don't go around celebrating and saying like, oh, guess how many lies I told this week."
Right.
But we will go around and brag, like humble brag, right? Oh, I put in 60 hours of work this week,
I've worked 10 days in a row, haven't had a day off.
Yeah.
Or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's giving Romans 2 for me. How about I say that? It's giving Romans 2 where Paul is like or maybe it's the end of Romans 1. I think it's the end of Romans 1 where he's essentially saying like hardness of heart,
Mm-hmm.
darkness of heart increases as we find ourselves celebrating in the wickedness of others.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for me, it feels a little bit like the culture of work and busyness and anti-Sabbath is like this glorification
Mm-hmm.
of what God has called sin.
Yeah.
And I think that there's an intrinsic, especially for those who know Jesus, who are following Jesus, who have the Holy Spirit, there's an internal conviction
Mm-hmm.
of that reality when you begin to talk about Sabbath, that if they're not ready to surrender that portion of their life, what do we do when we're not ready to surrender a portion of our life that's not surrendered to God? We run from it.
Mm-hmm.
We avoid the instances where we're going to come under conviction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that people are going to run from this. And by running, I mean, I don't necessarily think that our like Sunday morning services are going to be any smaller when we're preaching on it, but I think we're going to get a sense of the people's tuning out.
Yeah. Right. It's like, how are we going, like, well, that's really nice for someone who that's the thing that I think is going to be the big thing is there's going to be a lot of internal justification. Not like I think there's like a couple different pockets. I think some people are really nervous when we talk about Sabbath because their vision of Sabbath is not very life-giving.
Mm.
Like maybe what they grew up with or what their vision of a really conservative
Yeah.
practice of Sabbath looks like.
Mhm.
And it's like we were talking to somebody and they were like, well, you know, you can't do anything that's not associated with God. You can't play games on Sabbath. You can play like
A Bible game.
Bible game,
Monopoly.
Bible Monopoly or something like that. And so like that's not a very like I don't like Monopoly to begin with. I don't know that I'm gonna like Bible Monopoly much more.
I'm Joshua.
Sure, you just want to walk around this board, huh? Make all the tenants.
I'm just gonna killing everyone. It's killing everyone that's in my way.
Just don't pick Job. He wouldn't do well in Monopoly.
He would not.
So like that's not a very compelling vision of Sabbath. So I think some people have this like that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound beautiful.
No, and one of the things that I said last night, one of the things that I said last night, and I think it's increasingly true, and it just kind of came to me. I wasn't planning to say it. It kind of came to me as we were talking about it last night in Bible study. It's like there's this counter-formational way that we are thinking about life and work and everything, and Sabbath is the counter-formation against the culture.
Yeah.
But there's against the culture in general, but I also think there's this stream of counter-formation that needs to happen against oppressive, legalistic, ritualistic, religious systems and upbringings that have given us that twisted view of Sabbath and that have not allowed us to see it in a life-giving, joy-filled, beautiful way,
right?
That makes it the central part of someone's week, or someone desires to pursue Sabbath because of how beautiful it is.
Right. It's either a drudgery, or I think the other component is that there's too many obstacles to it, or at least that becomes the justification. I'm anticipating a lot of people having this conversation with themselves of like, oh, well, it's easy for Pastor Luke to say that he needs the Sabbath because he doesn't have any kids. Or, whatever. Like, I'm not in a season of life where I can Sabbath. I have to do X, Y, and Z. And so Sabbath is just simply a thing I can't do because I've got kids or I've got, and you had something to say about that last night.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I've got as many reasons to not Sabbath as anyone.
You do. You be busy.
I'd be busy. I'd be busy. I got a couple different jobs. I have a big family. And the jobs that I do have tend to be on the more demanding side. And I'm not saying I'm killing it at Sabbath. I'm just saying, like, what I'm saying is I get it as much as anyone gets it, that Sabbath is hard, especially when you have kids. But what I think the problem with that mindset is that it's actually a problem with us internally, with our heart, in the way that we view the role of parenting. If we view parenting as the job that we have, which I understand, it is hard work. It is, for some people, it is their job. It's my wife's. She stays at home.
Yeah.
Parenting is her job. But if we view it strictly as a job, then we will always view our kids as something that we must Sabbath from.
Yeah.
Rather than invite them into. And so our Sabbath is never, even in Scripture, was never something that an individual person observed or celebrated on their own. They celebrated it within their community. And the most intimate form of community is your family. And so Sabbath must be something that we create as a rhythm and a celebration with our family, our kids included. They must be welcomed into the Sabbath rhythm. We must create rhythms of Sabbath that are appropriate and contextual for them as well, so that they begin to understand its place in the life of believers early.
Yeah.
Which goes to the point that we kind of talked about again last night about Sabbath intentionality.
Yep. Yeah. Well, because I think Sabbath, as we're talking about, I think people get these different pictures. You get people who are thinking of Sabbath as this, like, you got to be sitting in a pew all day and can't do anything that's not God related. I think people who get a picture of it as like it is a vacation day, right? It's like they think of it like they want it to be like they're going to a resort. They get to just like do nothing. Or some people just think of it as like, well, I have days off where I do things, without a whole lot of intention to it. I shared personally that like one of the things that I've had to wrestle with is my own like technology use. Like I have found that like if I enter into a Sabbath and I don't have intentionality around what I'm going to do during that day, I will gravitate towards the lowest common denominator, and then I will not feel rested and restored.
Yep.
I will spend time watching videos. I will spend time just like doing things around the house. And then I get to the end of the day and I was like, yeah, okay, that was like a day off. But did I do anything that was like restorative to my soul?
Yeah.
Did I go outside and touch grass? Like,
Right.
did I spend time with friends or family in a meaningful and connecting way? Or did I just kind of like, I didn't really have any plans, so I just spent it all by myself and I feel a little bit more disconnected at the end of the day than restored? Like, there has to be some intentionality to it.
Right. And that becomes even more. It becomes even more concentrated. Your intentionality becomes more concentrated when you have family, when you have kids. That was kind of the point that I was getting to, was that if there's no sense of planning towards the Sabbath the day before, or even the days before, then when you get there, you just fall into the lowest common denominator of like, you like screech into Sabbath by the skin of your emotional, physical, mental teeth, and then you fall apart and you end up just being like lazy. Right. Sabbath is not laziness.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that like is kind of hard to get articulated, is that like I think we're just like, well, Sabbath means I don't do anything. And like in some regard it does kind of mean that.
It means you stop doing some things, but it doesn't mean you don't do anything.
Right. It's not like a day you just sit there.
Right.
Become a bump on a log.
Right.
Or like, a lizard next to the pool. Like you've got to be doing something.
Yeah, and some of that something you're doing is the physical. We tend to think that like laying down for physical rest or something is doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because our culture forms us that movement means something, you're doing something.
Yeah.
Rest isn't something that you do.
Right.
It's something that you do when you're not doing anything else. Rest if we view rest as a proactive activity that we're involving ourselves in, like, what are you doing tomorrow? Oh, I'm like taking a nap. Like that's my proactive, intentional plan for restfulness, to experience the gift of God of rest. That's doing something. It's not laziness.
Yep.
Laziness is really a first to heart attitude. But anyway,
but I had a theology professor and he loved to, it is clever, but he said it over and over and over again. He's just like, look, you need to learn to not just have recreation, but recreation.
Okay. Sounds like a Bible professor.
Yeah, he totally was. But like his point there is that like, do something that's beautiful, something that like is kind of enjoying a good gift of the Lord, that is doing something that's creative, something that's productive, something that's, like I don't know, like for me, like, if I'm gonna Sabbath, like watching like a Netflix show is fine, I think. For me personally, like other people, you're gonna have to make that own judgment, but I can't watch more than 2 episodes of a show.
Mhm.
Like, if it's going down into, like, binge land, like, it is becoming not good for my soul,
Yeah.
is my own judgment of that.
Mhm.
And I need to read something, and I need to be outside, and I need to connect with people. I like
Mhm.
those are things that, like, I need to do that are good for my soul in a sense. Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know how else to kinda get at that and
Mhm.
help people capture a vision of what's life-giving. I think,
Yeah.
like, thinking about Sabbath and saying what would be life-giving more than what would be, quote, unquote, "restful." I feel like that might be the better question for people,
Mhm.
because I think our idea of restful is skewed.
Yeah. And a part of it too is that we are dealing with a short amount of time
Yeah.
against a huge cultural influence in people's lives.
Mhm.
And so I have even been questioning, like, and it was a little bit even with the prayer series
Mhm.
in the same way. There wasn't a whole lot of practical.
Right.
We weren't like helping people to create prayer practices as much as we were trying to stir the heart to faith in prayer.
Mhm.
Like that's what I wanted. Like I want to stir people's hearts. I think that that is what moves them to this
Yeah.
place of desiring the way of Jesus,
Mhm.
following after the way of Jesus,
Yeah.
and if we can get them following after the way of Jesus, they begin to hunger and thirst and
Mhm.
seek and find and so a little bit of that I feel a tension as a preacher and as a pastor to say how much of this, because what everyone wants to know with Sabbath is the practical things. Well, what can I do and not do?
Yeah. Right.
But that kind of just displays this legalistic,
Mhm.
duty bound way of thinking about, talking about the Sabbath that is wrapped up in a world of performance and pleasure
Yeah.
and production. And let me get this Sabbath thing over so I can get back to the more important thing. And that's what troubles me the most. And so
Mhm.
that's why I think that's why I don't want to say I'm worried about if this is gonna quote unquote take.
Mhm.
I'm I am I think what I would say is I'm becoming more sober minded
Yeah.
about the monster of cultural formation that our people are under.
It's huge.
Yeah. And and the necessity of a move of God
Mhm.
to change it.
Yeah. Mm.
Like in I heard a pastor say the other day in response to someone talking about the church fighting the culture war.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he said, "We are not fighting the culture war. We have lost.
Oh
We
my
have
gosh, yeah.
lost the culture war."
Yeah.
And in and I'm I'm beginning to agree with that we have lost the culture war. And so fighting it in the traditional sense that we have been
Mhm.
fighting it, I think is a fool's errand. And so to kind of reorient where we are putting now our effort
Mhm.
in light of the culture war into really like asking the Lord in prayer,
Yeah.
contending for our
Yeah.
world in prayer to say, Lord, without a miraculous intervention, um, w- we're we're done.
Mhm.
Barna, I read a Barna article from 2023 that said, without the that the church in the Western world is now in a state of irreversible decline without a move of God and a radical new form of discipleship.
Mhm.
Without a radical new form of discipleship and Barna, the research people,
Right.
the
The stats people.
stats people, the
Mhm.
numbers people were like, the numbers are clear. irreversible decline unless God moves.
Mm-hmm.
We are losing more
Yeah.
Christians than we are making.
Yep. It's been that way for a while.
Right.
And it's just becoming more and more clear.
More and more more and more aware.
Yeah. We've for a while now, at least, I'm pretty sure we've not been planting enough new churches to counteract the amount of churches that close each year.
Right. Yeah, or just a month, or just the number of people who are disillusioned with faith, walking away from faith, dying, and we're not making. I mean, I know it sounds like we're not talking about replacement cost here, but it's kind of like we're not replacing dying saints with new Christians.
That's what Catholics do. That's what Catholics aren't.
Right.
Catholics aren't struggling in that regard. Yeah, I think I am inclined to also agree with that. I think the pockets, like if you're like, I think the pockets of people who would say they're Christians that are fighting the culture war,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that my concern with that is that whenever I see somebody over there is like waving a little Christian flag and saying that they're fighting the culture war, is not all the time, but a significant amount of the time is it's losing more and more resemblance with Christ.
Yep.
And any resemblance to the fruits of the Spirit.
Right. Which is a loss.
That's
an L.
Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, you might be over there fighting against, progressive sexuality or something like that, but you look nothing like Jesus while doing it.
Right.
And that's a loss. Like, that's not.
Yeah. And like, what is it? What is your form of fighting the culture where you're sharing you're resharing a couple incendiary posts on Facebook,
yeah,
and you're calling that fighting the culture war? Like,
yeah,
give me a break, bro. Like, just not it.
Yeah.
Not it at all.
Yeah.
So I said all that to say in regards to Sabbath, like, we are up against something that will not be fixed by simply preaching a few good sermons. Like, we need God's presence.
Mm-hmm.
We need God's presence here. We need Him to miraculously intervene on our behalf, to do what is impossible to do in the culture. So, I would like, I think not to shift and keeping it on Sabbath, but shifting a little bit, would like to talk a little bit about the boundaries of the Sabbath day. When does Sabbath start? And when does Sabbath end? Because as I was preparing for last night, and then over the last 24 hours or so, just considering my own Sabbath ritual, and considering what would change if I went from a Jewish day to a Roman day, which we use now. And so just wondering your thoughts on that conversation that we had. Maybe tee it up for everyone listening about what we're actually talking about.
So if we're saying, okay, Sabbath is going to be the traditional 24 hours of stopping, of resting, of recreating. And we're going to do that. We can do if I was to ask kindergartner, when does the day start? They would say in the morning when I wake up, when I get out of bed, right? That's the way we conceptualize our days, and we have for centuries at this point, largely. Now, when you read the Old Testament, or not the Old Testament, the Bible, and you read the New Testament, particularly when it gets to Holy Week and Christ dying on the cross, and then him being buried for 3 days, a lot of times people come away saying he wasn't buried for 3 days. There's a little bit of confusion around all of that. And the reason is because ancient Jews, understood their days to start and end at different times. For them, the start and end of a day was sundown, not necessarily sun up. So a sunset is around 7 o'clock here now, something like that. So our day today would end at 7,
Mm-hmm.
and the new day would start.
Yeah. Right. Friday
Friday
actually starts tonight.
Friday starts tonight,
Yeah.
around dinner time. And that would be the start of the new day. And so, traditionally when Jews still practice Sabbath today, when they Shabbat, um, it starts on Friday night at sundown. And then it ends on Saturday night
Mm-hmm.
at sundown.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's when their days, it doesn't start and begin at the end of the day. So the question you're asking then is like, does it make a difference in the way that we experience Sabbath in our current culture if we say my Sabbath is going to start the next morning I wake up versus starting the evening before I start that full day?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the question. That's ultimately the question that I'm asking.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. I'm curious to practice that myself to
Mhm.
see if it might, because I have suspicions that it will change, that it would change things.
Yeah, well, traditionally, I think one of the things is that traditionally, if you change that, so traditional Sabbath practice usually starts with a shared meal on Friday night. And everyone comes to someone's house, usually the matriarch and patriarch or whatever. All the families are gathering in these kind of bigger family units. The kids are coming home from the suburbs or whatever. Everyone's coming home and they gather together. It's sundown. They have the meal. They light the Shabbat candles. They like say some prayers and then they enjoy the meal. They relax into the evening, and then the next day is the rest of their Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And they do what they're going to do. They go to temple, they do all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then rest, taking naps.
Mm-hmm.
There are old ancient Jewish documents that like highlight different practices that people can do on Sabbath, and like napping is one of them. Sex with your spouse is one of them. Like there's a whole bunch of things that can be done or were traditionally practiced on the Sabbath. But I think having that meal ahead of time so that you have this community moment,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of having that like in the more American way, which is like Sunday dinner or Sunday like late lunch, where everyone's running home and they're having to like get the meal all ready and then come. And that kind of can sometimes be a little crazy unless you're like a crock pot master, which is maybe like a thing. We need to become better at crock pots to practice Sabbath better. But I think there's something about starting it that way,
Mm-hmm.
getting some physical night rest, and then starting your day already partly into the rest
Mm-hmm.
and into the Sabbath, rather than like crashing and burning at the end of the day, sleeping in and waking up and saying, all right, I got to bring some intentionality to my Sabbath now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of it is like going to bed. It's that shared, it's all those things.
Yeah.
It's all those things. But part of it for me, I feel is like going to bed already in a rhythm of Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has started. I go like just the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual load
Mm-hmm.
has been lifted, and you start with a Sabbath meal and time with your family or with your community or
Mm-hmm.
whoever it is, and then you kind of enter into this place of like really meaningful rest. So
Yeah.
and then also I feel a little bit like there's less pressure,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, at the end of my Sabbath,
Mm-hmm.
there's a portion of the day
Mm-hmm.
that now is, I
You can reconnect. You can do whatever you
reconnect, I
want.
can do the work, I
Yeah.
can, lock in again, whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. And so there's this sense of like, um, yeah, I guess it feels different.
Yeah.
It feels different.
I
I don't know what to say other than that. But.
Well, I think too, it's like we're so conditioned for our mornings to be wake up, go. And when we have our Sabbath day and our Sabbath day starts in the morning, it's really hard to switch that rhythm off for some of us. We're just like, "Oh, I'm supposed to be going." And I think that's hard. And I think, I think it just, I think we need more transitions than we think we do. Like, anybody who like works with kids or has kids knows that kids do not go from point A to point B very simply, right? Like, I'm curious, when you guys are taking your kids somewhere, how big of a warning time do you have to like give for like getting the kids ready to get out the door to go somewhere?
Well, it depends. It depends on how long we want to endure the chaos. So, all of our kids are different. Some of them don't do well with immediate transitions or like changes of rhythm or schedule, and so they need a little bit more notice.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what we try to do is we try to do a bunch of the work that is required for us to leave the house without them knowing,
because they're gonna get too emotionally excited.
Yes. So we set the shoes out, we pack the bag, we get the jackets, make sure all the jackets are hung up. Okay, they know they can just go get their jackets, they can get their shoes. And then depending on the thing, we're like, all right, it's time to go. And we maybe give ourselves, 5, 8, 10 minutes to get to the car.
Yeah.
So,
but you've still done like 45 minutes of prep.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The prep has been done. So we're just taking it out of the hands of the kids.
Yeah.
Because that is like, you give the prep to the kids, it's like brushing your teeth while eating an Oreo.
Yeah.
Like,
it is. Where's your other shoe?
Right. It just does not make any sense. There's no forward progress made.
That is some parenting wisdom there. But that's definitely like, especially when like we were watching our nephews the other week and we needed to go somewhere and like, they weren't exactly super excited about going to this thing. And so we're like, oh shoot, we need to leave in 2 minutes. Like, okay, kids, let's go. And they're all just like, oh, wait, I got to put on my shoe. I want to change my outfit. No. And like, they needed that transition. And so like, I think as adults, we neglect giving ourselves like transition moments in and out of things. Like, I don't have much of a commute. I haven't had much of a commute, but now I really don't have much of a commute. One of the things I miss about being in Chicago is a little bit of the commute, as much as that's kind of crazy for me to say, because the commute in Chicago to get to work was nuts. But it took me an hour to get to work, even though I only lived like 2 miles from work. But I had to get on a bus. I had to walk to the bus stop, get on a bus, get on the L, get off the L, and walk a couple blocks. And while I'm doing that, I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm listening to a podcast, a sermon, I'm thinking, I'm reading, I'm doing something. And that was how I started my day to get into work. It was how I ended my day to get home. Now I live less than a minute drive from the church.
Literally. Less than a minute. Yeah.
So I have like zero commute. I'm almost starting to feel like I'm not ever actually leaving home.
I bet you, honestly, your commute is so short. I bet if we walked out of the front door at the same time and I was like, I'm going to jog to your house, that I could jog to your house before you could make it to your car.
Yeah.
And do all the stop signs and the 2 turns that you have to make.
Yeah, the 2 turns.
I could be at your house about the same time, if not quicker.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Just about. Yeah. Especially. Yeah. And so I don't have that commute. I don't have that transition time anymore. Yeah. And so sometimes I get home and I'm just like, I'm still trying to unwind from having just been at my desk. Like I need to go for a walk or I need something to transition. So I think having Sabbath starting at the end of our traditional day, I think gives you a way to transition. Man, that was a really long way to talk about all that. But anyways.
Yeah. No, I agree. It is, I'm eager to try that. I'm going to try it this week. So let's say Thursday, my Sabbath will start tomorrow night, say around 7 p.m. or so.
Yeah. I think the part that I'm really interested, I want to do that too. I want to do the evening start and end, but I also want to do something to mark it. Like I want to get a candle
Mm-hmm.
and I want to have like some prayer or a meditation to do and like gonna sit down, gonna light this candle, gonna read this prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the start of Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And then like do the same thing to end it so that I'm not being so fuzzy. Cause like if I don't start and end it in this like very practical
Mm-hmm.
demarcation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more apt to say, "Oh, is today really my Sabbath?" Or
Mm-hmm.
like, well, like I can, and I end up a whole bunch of things get added into the day that are not
Mm-hmm.
Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
So interested to see what bringing some intentionality to that.
Yeah. Yep.
If that will bring some more intentionality in my heart
about it.
position towards it. As crazy as some people listening to this might be thinking, like, is Luke becoming an Orthodox Jew? I'm not. But I think those things are important or helpful.
Yeah. Well, and listen, there are practical. I'm asking practical questions about that, just even in my own life. Like if I do that Friday night Sabbath start,
Mm-hmm.
then there's things that sometimes happen on Saturdays
Mm-hmm.
that I have real questions about.
Right.
Like just I don't know about. Like we have a men's breakfast here
Yes.
that I lead.
Yeah. Is that
Is that it?
Sabbath? Yeah.
Some of our kids have like dance activities on Saturday.
Yep.
And it usually is a little bit of it's a thing. It's a thing to get there and to get back, So I'm having these questions too.
Yeah.
And I don't really know.
Yeah.
Yet, but I'm gonna Sabbath as I can, not Sabbath as I can't to begin with.
Yep.
And then just allow God to form that in me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if you have questions about what we've been talking about with Sabbath, we'd love to hear them in the comments or in a message line or whatever. We'd just be interested to hear what your reflections have been on this so far. We've got more to talk about for sure.
Yeah, we got weeks.
Yep.
We got weeks of Sabbath to talk about.
Yeah.
So.
I think the next thing I want to talk about is Sabbath still a 10 commandment?
Okay.
And is it binding?
Okay.
Maybe to at least start.
All right, let's do it. That's a good question. If you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments what you think about that question.
Yeah.
And we will catch you on the next one.